The final battle of the Thousand-Year Blood War comes to an end, bringing the conflict between the Soul Reapers and the Quincy's to a dramatic conclusion where there are a lot of incredible moments and surprises that are packed into a very, very small amount of pages to wrap up this war. Did this work? Well, let's talk about it. We left off with Ichigo losing round 1 of this last fight, only able to continue thanks to some help from his cousin, while Yuabaha left the palace to go destroy the Soul Society and the living world. Obviously, things were not looking good. The big bad is about to unleash utter destruction, and the last attempt to stop him ended poorly. It's really bleak, it's easy to fall into despair, but who is waiting for Yuabaha when he goes down to the Serite? Sosuke Aizen, and he's sitting right where we left him. I honestly would have been pretty disappointed if we went through all of that trouble of partially unsealing and then hauling Aizen out of the Mukin, only for him to do what he's done up to this point in the arc. Don't get me wrong, when he returned, all of that was badass and it was hype, but it was brief. And then we didn't see him for a long time as everyone else went off to the final conflict up in the palace. And I'd been wondering for a bit where he was until we saw him recently. They really did get him out of his jail cell just to leave him tied to a chair when everyone else went off to the final battle. But that turned out for the best when he becomes the sole member of Yuabaha's welcoming party. And that panel of Aizen sitting there saying, "Welcome to my Soul Society," is just too good. Look at this. Amazing. Despite being bound to this chair, his powers dampened, and a literal prisoner, it doesn't feel that way. No, the way this is depicted makes that chair that's, robbing him of his abilities and restraining him, it makes that chair feel more like a throne. And in this moment, it really does feel like the Soul Society is his dominion now. He's looking at a guy that's essentially the new god and saying, "No, this is mine. I'm the rightful ruler. Welcome." And I found myself thinking a lot about what he meant by the Soul Society being his. With everything that's happened, most of our characters are up at the palace, and Aizen really is all that remains down below. At least anyone of any real significance. I mean, I guess there's Zombie Izuru, and maybe Ukatake might still be vomiting out Mimihagi in the anime, but yeah, it's really just Aizen. But is that really what he means by the Soul Society being his? Initially, I thought it might be just that, a way of showing that he really is all that's here now at the end. But once I read more of these chapters and saw where this was going, this moment kind of took on a whole different context. Because yes, I think part of it is, he's the last one, quote unquote, standing, but I think it's more of Aizen teasing a little bit, as he likes to do. We'll get into the specifics in a bit, but Aizen's illusionary, sensory capturing abilities end up being used on full display eventually. Yes, he's restricted by the chair, but maybe he's hinting that Yuabaha is already under his spell, that the Soul Society that the Quincy King has come to isn't what it seems to be, but is instead the mirage that Aizen has put over it for anyone that's seen his release. That what even we're seeing is this veil over the Soul Society, and that we can't trust our own eyes. I've talked before how Aizen's machinations are written so well that it sometimes feels like the reader is hypnotized by his power too, since we've seen his release, and I maintain that even now. Is it an excuse to explain why he tricks me all the time? Absolutely, that as well, but I really do think it's that effective. Yuabaha had essentially entered Aizen's funhouse, whether he knew it or not. Remember, these two villains have met before when Yuabaha tried and failed to recruit Aizen when he was imprisoned, something that's only talked about in the manga, but actually shown in the anime, and we know that Aizen initially did affect Yuabaha with his power then, because he messed with his perception of time, and once he's shown his power to you even once, you're capable of being deceived again. But obviously, since that was towards the beginning of the Thousand-Year Blood War arc, a lot of their circumstances have changed drastically since then. Both of these extremely powerful antagonists have spent the last chunk of the story just sitting down in chairs characters. And like I alluded to before, really more like their respective thrones. Just chilling while people have been having big character moments, big emotional payoffs, big transformations, or just gotten really big. And only recently did Yuabaha decide to get off his ass, and now Aizen finally has a chance to do the same after his chair is destroyed, and he makes a point that now he can literally stand in Yuabaha's way. So hype. I'm so glad they're not allies. I wanted to see them face off, and here it is. And it's not even a situation of like, I'm the one that's gonna destroy the Soul Society, not you. That kind of typical conflict between villains that happens sometimes, and it's definitely not Aizen turning over a new leaf and wanting to protect the Soul Society. Hell, he even acknowledges that protecting his captors isn't for his own benefit, you know? It's a much more fitting reason, deeply rooted in who Aizen has always been throughout the series, and what he really wants. This whole time, he's always been about destroying anyone seeking to control him, and that includes Yuabaha. He wants to be at the top, remember? He wants to stand at the top where no one else will be above him. He didn't want to bow to the Soul King, especially after learning what he was really like. In some ways, Aizen is just fighting for absolute freedom, even from divine overlords. The Soul King may have been usurped by his son, but I don't think that matters to Aizen. It's just more of the same. He's dedicated to the same fight he's been waging since the beginning. The fight against the higher beings that stand above everyone else. But what looked like it could be a one-on-one between them turns into something else when Ichigo and Renji show up. And Yuabaha is immediately like, I saw you would be coming, and I saw your sword would break again. And sure enough, Ichigo's sword starts to break. Did I not say this might happen last video? I was like, why are we going in here without a plan if it does break? What makes this different? Why can't Yuabaha just break it with a thought again? And Yuabaha sees Renji coming at him, so he has his arm be cut off and he has Aizen's sword break. So yeah, it's looking really bad, but Aizen fighting alongside our heroes is a pretty wild thing to actually see here at the end, but I love this kind of thing. And it's almost making up for how little we actually got to see our other returning antagonists have to work with the heroes recently. I loved that there's no time for preparation and there's no plan between them, and yet Aizen immediately starts using his illusion powers in fun, team-oriented ways, disguising Ichigo and Renji as each other. And what makes this especially cool is that it's someone all-seeing like Yuabaha, whose eyes and vision have been such a big part of his design and his character, pitting his eyesight against someone known for messing with perception. It's a wonderful dichotomy to play with between the two biggest villains of Bleach, and it was the perfect setup for an amazing payoff. Yuabaha seems to be able to see right through Aizen's illusion. He thinks he has it all figured out because it seems like the trick is Ichigo and Renji swapping places. So he grabs Ichigo, deals a huge blow to his chest, and is about to finish him off along with destroying the Soul Society, when suddenly the Ichigo in his grasp is actually Aizen, who's like, oh, you see me as Ichigo Kurosaki? Which is such an incredible moment, and is also the perfect distraction for the real Ichigo coming to stab Yuabaha from behind. This may be Aizen's final trick in the series. It's so badass and fun, and it just makes perfect sense that Aizen would be able to pull off one final illusion in the last battle, one that's capable of fooling a supposedly all-seeing god, and he's all about giving the middle finger to higher beings, so this is glorious. It's absolutely glorious, and it fooled me too, by the way, but that's just typical Aizen at this point. I'm used to that after these couple years, and he just had to blow my mind one last time. I'm honestly surprised we didn't see Aizen's Bankai throughout all of this. If there was ever a time, I assumed this would be it. But maybe we didn't even really need to, because his Shikai is so powerful that it's able to fool a guy like Yuabaha, so I still feel like I can't even fathom what Aizen's Bankai could be. But yeah, it would have been interesting to actually see. Maybe in some of the light novels or other supplementary material later on, but we don't get it here. And it really seemed like it was enough for a second. Our big hero and villain team up to defeat their mutual enemy, the final boss, and it seems successful after Ichigo point blank Getsuga Tensho's Yuabaha after Aizen distracts him. Really awesome moment. And I loved that Aizen acknowledges Ichigo's adaptability and even brings up how Ichigo still has never seen his release, which allowed him to act without being affected by the illusions, something that was once the key to Ichigo being the only one that could challenge Aizen, and now once again played a pretty critical role. I don't know if it's showing that Ichigo sees the real truth, as a character. He fights for the real truth. He fights to protect people from all of this chaos, and he sees through it. But unfortunately, this fight isn't over as Aizen is taken out, and by taken out I don't mean killed, but he's out of the fight. While Yuabaha returns, and it's crazy that he can literally rewrite his own death if it happens in the future. He essentially can't die because he just overrides the death. So yeah, once again I'm like, how are we supposed to defeat him? We are running out of pages and he's still not dead. It was just nerve-wracking, I'm holding the book in my hands and I'm like, there's such a slim margin to win. Things were still really bleak for a second there until an arrow pierces Yuabaha, shot by Uryu, and this is a special arrow made from the residue left behind when Uryu's mom was killed by the House Valen. So there's something really poetic about that, with Yuabaha's actions coming back to haunt him, overlooking the small details, something that the remnants of the people that were beneath him coming back to actually bite him. I liked that a lot, but the arrow is able to neutralize his almighty powers for a moment, giving Ichigo the chance to deal an actual finishing blow, for real this time. Right? I loved that it's a combination of Ichigo and Uryu that defeats Yuabaha, since especially in the anime, they felt like the two primary heroes on either side of this war. So that was really cool. But, and there's a big but here, this whole part of the fight is just so rushed and comes out of nowhere. We saw Ryukin give the arrow to Uryu briefly before this, but everything with the arrowhead in particular is something that maybe could work better if it's expanded upon in the anime, and I'm sure it will be, but here it's just very, very convenient. A Deus Ex Machina. I like that it's a contribution from Ryukin, and I especially liked that it tied back to his position as a doctor that allowed him to discover the sliver in his wife's body, something that Uryu didn't understand at the time and haunted him. So that was interesting to call back to all that. I just wish it had been brought up a bit sooner maybe, because it really feels like Ryukin just shows up with the key to winning, and that's that. It's over. As sort of an aside, I also wish the dads were more present for this final battle too, considering their own history with Yuabaha and how important everything but the rain was in this arc. Isshin and Ryukin could have played so much more of a role in all of this. So that felt like a massive missed opportunity. The dads should have been more present. Hopefully the anime will give them more. It's just all very rushed in its execution, and I know that Kubo wasn't in the best health and forced to end the series quickly by the publishers, and all of that's so unfortunate because you can really feel that in the work. So much is thrown at us all of a sudden in a few pages that are supposed to explain this defeat, and while it all sort of checks out plot point wise and is actually impressive considering how quickly Bleach was forced to end, the suddenness of all of this still leaves a lot to be desired. It's very abrupt as an ending to this conflict, and as a solution to all of this, especially when Yuabaha was built up so much as this unbeatable, unkillable, godly thing, to then just go, oh, we have this special arrow. It almost works in like a fantasy way, where there's a special weapon that can defeat the bad guy, or a weak point, the black arrow from the Hobbit, or the Master Sword, things like that, but it's all just so abrupt. And again, I know it was due to unfortunate circumstances around the creation of Bleach. So I'm hopeful that we can alleviate that a little bit with how the anime adaptation changes things. This is where the anime should make the most changes, honestly, and by changes, I mean just expand on the events leading to it. I'm cool with overall what happens. They just need more room to build it up and more room for it to breathe, and I think it'll be vastly improved. And I knew something like this might be coming because one of the things I knew about Bleach going into it was people said that the ending is is very rushed. And I'm no stranger to this type of thing. I'm a Yu Yu Hakusho fan, alright? I'm not a big fan of the end of that series, and I love that series, but the end, for similar reasons, wasn't what it could have been. But just because this was a little bit rushed doesn't mean there aren't some incredible things within the hastily unfolding chaos, and I'm sure this video has shown that to you. The eyes and stuff was great. I absolutely love Zangetsu kind of shedding and being the more iconic version beneath. There was like a real purity to that felt right, since that's the version of our hero's sword we were with the longest. It's the blade I always think of when I initially picture Ichigo in my head. It's iconic, and I loved that it got to deal the finishing blow to the final villain. I gotta say though, I'm a little confused by the Ugram Hosh fault of it all, but here's where I'm at right now with my thoughts. So prior to the final fight happening, we saw Yuabaha have a dream about Ichigo coming and attacking him, looking more like the traditional Ichigo with the same version of Zangetsu that eventually defeats Yuabaha. And Yuabaha wakes up and he's like, oh, it was just a dream. And this was during the period where Hoshvalt had the Almighty, so he was seeing the future events while Yuabaha was sleeping, and then the Almighty got passed back to Yuabaha and he woke up. So he just thinks, oh, it was a weird nightmare. But it turns out it was more than a dream. It was one of the many possible futures that has now kind of come to pass. So I guess when their powers were swapped and they were about to switch back, Hoshvalt showed Yuabaha this vision, and it was the last thing Yuabaha saw before he woke up. Hoshvalt could see it, and then he let Yuabaha see it as the powers went back, I guess. And by Yuabaha writing it off as nothing more than a dream, it's kind of showing how arrogant he is, that just because he can see the future and even change the future doesn't mean he'll know the right way to handle what comes to pass. Does that sound right? That this was a warning from Hoshvalt that Yuabaha ignored? Yes? If that's the case, I love that his own pride helped contribute to his defeat, that he couldn't fathom there's a future where he lost, so he doesn't think it's real even when he sees it right before his eyes. Like, I initially thought, oh, maybe Yugo sabotaged him or something, having a change of heart, but I don't think that that's it at all. I think he died with regret, sure, but was still loyal to Yuabaha. My interpretation is that he was really trying to help Yuabaha with a heads up here about a possible future, but you can't always get through to someone that doesn't care about what you have to say, no matter how important it is. But yes, with Yuabaha's powers on hold, Ichigo's able to deal a finishing blow and ends this 1,000-year blood war. Does the conclusion of the war feel rushed? Yes. Undeniably, honestly. It would be hard to argue when this is all handled in so few pages. It's just very, very quick. And I feel like I have a little bit of whiplash from it. That's how fast it all felt. I still really enjoyed it, but I think there's a lot of room for improvement, and thankfully Bleach is in a pretty unique spot, and the 1,000-Year Blood War anime is the perfect way to make those improvements. So I'm extremely excited to see how they handle this last fight in particular, and what things they could do to improve it. For me, I say let's not only extend the fight out a bit, but give that arrow more proper build up, maybe just kind of make these moments hit a bit harder. In general, let everything breathe more, let everything kind of not feel so thrown at you at once. And I know this is supposed to be chaotic and crazy, but I do think so many of these moments could hit harder if they're given a little bit more time. But while this is the end of the war, this is not the end of the Bleach manga quite yet. So I'll see you in 10 years to discuss the epilogue of the Bleach manga and the end of its serialization as I finish the original story written and drawn by Tite Kubo that I have been reading and analyzing for about 4 years. So it's gonna be interesting to really talk about this ending. That'll do it for now, guys. I'll see you guys in 10 years. As always, if you like what you see here, please like and subscribe. If you want to support the channel a little bit more, I have a Patreon where I read manga and watch anime. And yeah, right now we're also going through the Bleach filler arcs. So yeah, thanks. I'll see you guys soon. Take care.